Сайн байцгаана уу? Бүгдээрэнд нь энэ өглөөний мэндийг хүргэе. За манай keynote session маань эхэлж байна. Уламжлалсаар бид өнөөдөр дотоодын болон гадаадын нэг нийт 2 keynote илтгэлтэй байгаа. За манай эхний keynote илтгэгч маань доктор Philip Smith манай Монгол улсад интернет үйлчилгээг анх оруулахад ажилласан олон хүмүүсийн маань нэг байгаа. Өнөөдөр Philip Smith маань Монголын интернет үйлчилгээний түүх буюу битээс гигабит хүртэл гэдэг сэдвээр бидэнд ярих байгаа. Okay, hello everyone, and today we have 2 keynote speeches and from local and international speakers as usual. And our first keynote speaker is Dr. Philip Smith, and he's one of the many people who introduced internet in Mongolia. And he will talk about a Mongolian internet journey from bit to gigabit. And please welcome Dr. Philip Smith.
Good morning, everyone. Just let me get myself organized here. Share my screen, do that, and do that. And that hopefully will, you can all see it and you can all hear me as well. I don't know, I was more than very honored to be invited by the program committee to give a keynote talk here. I never really considered that have much to say or much to share, but given I have been visiting Mongolia for a few years now, the program committee encouraged me to try and share some of my experiences just from, just more from my perspective, rather than trying to give a definitive history of the internet, or the internet as it's developed in Mongolia. In fact, for the first time in mnNOG, we had Dr. ERDEMNET, who presented his really fascinating story, starting all the way back in December 1994, in fact, all the way up to the current date when we had mnNOG3. And actually, Network Startup Resource Center, who I do some work for around the region, have had updates, statistics, and so forth. Really, some of the early numbers, and I've just put them up here, not as part of my talk, but just for some of the, I suppose, relative newcomers to the industry. You know, if you look in 1994, 16-line bulletin board system running on a 90 megahertz Pentium PC with a 4 gigabyte drive. I mean, these numbers are unimaginable today. And it just shows how the development has gone. January 1996 was the first 64 kilobit, not a misprint, kilobit per second link. PanAmSat, satellite operator, landing in Sprint in the US. So these are sort of give you some perspective of what it was like back then and where we are now. Anyway, enough of that. My story is starting here, really. And before 1998, I used to work for UK's biggest internet service provider. Spent 5 years doing that, but it was the formative time of the internet in the UK. I joined Cisco, some large equipment manufacturer, in 1998. And Cisco really encouraged me to head out into the region, Asia Pacific, at that point, and start sharing some of the experiences of how to design and build and operate internet service providers. And one of the activities was a partnership with UNDP. They had this AppDip activity, which was helping deploy internet in a lot of the countries in the region. So the first workshop that we did with UNDP was this one. And I've just cut and pasted the announcement, no fancy HTML. This was the actual email that was sent out. I mean, I can post this and none of the email, well, the email addresses don't work, the domain doesn't work anymore. But this is what it was about, 27th of November, 1998. We did this, I suppose, ISP or internet routing workshop. And what was interesting we had some people coming from Mongolia. In fact, this workshop had participants from all over the Asia and Pacific region. And what's fascinating is I'm in touch with probably half of the people who participated in this early workshop 1998. But, you know, at least two of the Mongolian names there, I'm not going to shout them out, but they know who they are, formed good friendships, and I've done a lot of work with them basically since 1998. So it's been a long-term partnership, friendship, and therefore providing a lot of assistance to Mongolia as well. The main thing with this workshop was teaching best practices. That's very unusual for an equipment manufacturer, because you normally, if you invite your vendor in, they'll teach you on the latest, greatest, fanciest technology. You know, and that's still fashionable today. Hey, let's teach the latest, greatest, fanciest. But what was very important for the activity that my colleague Barry Green and I were doing was to teach best practices, the best current operating practices to do things rather than the latest, greatest technology. So, you know, as aside from this workshop, or the series of workshops, these ISP workshops were hugely popular because we weren't promoting Cisco equipment. We were there promoting how the internet really works, how you really configure things, how you really operate things. So, and it's interesting, the training theme runs through all of this. And if I look at many of the other countries I've been to, the training theme forms the foundation of so many of the activities over the last 21, 22 years, I suppose. And so networking is it. So as I was saying, stayed in touch with many, many people. And the assistances, I was doing the research for this presentation, because I'm sure the program committee thought, yeah, Philip can talk about this off, you know, from memory. My memory is probably not what it used to be anymore. And I was looking back through, and there's some of the names there at the bottom of some of the operators that I have provided help with over the years. And it's just, you know, questions coming from friends in Mongolia saying, hey, can you help with this? Or can't get this address working, can't get this routing working, and so on. So we'll look at some more of the details. This one was fascinating. This was my first trip to Ulaanbaatar. 2005, Mobicom invited Gaurav Rajapadaya, who was working for Packet Clearing House at the time, to come and teach an ISP workshop. So we came, we taught the workshop. As you can see in the pictures in the bottom left and the bottom right, we flew all the equipment in as well. Those are in the days before virtualization, before running everything on PC servers and so forth. Equipment was flown in. That was another story. You can ask some of the folks from Mobicom who were around at the time about the fun and games of importing all that. But, you know, we ran the workshop. There were 9 ISPs at the time. 5 of them actually came, at least according to the participation list I have. So I didn't put it in the slides here, but why did we come? Mobicom was experiencing problems of their customers accessing some parts of the internet. And they weren't sure if it was something to do with routing best practices or connectivity through China or the satellite links or whatever. And one of the things we found was that some of the advice that they had from the vendor of the day was doing internet operational best practices. So blocking access to address space that wasn't actually globally routed. So it was still held in IANA's reserved pool. Problem is, nobody had been updating those filters that blocked that old address space. And so basically the email I got was, hey, Philip, we can no longer get access to BBC website, and CNN has gone. Are the Chinese filtering us? And I was like, well, I don't think they would be doing that. So a bit of research when we arrived, and we discovered that actually the filters of unused address space had not been updated probably about 2 or 3 years. Removed the filters or updated them for the current setting, and suddenly these websites had appeared, because 2003, 4, 5 was the time that a lot of the international news media had gone from running one web server in the data center to a globally distributed setup. So that was a fascinating visit, but that was really the start of a very close involvement. So anyway, the picture there is in the top right. If you recognize yourself, hello. It's 16 years ago. I think we've all got a little bit older and a little bit wiser since then. But it's still fascinating looking back at some of these events. But what else was in 2005? Well, there was MISPA, which is the ISP Association, which is really trying to figure out policy on foreign connections and interconnections. There was an exchange point called OpenMix, but it was all statically routed amongst the ISPs in the metro area around Ulaanbaatar. IT Park had just started up. And there was no network operators group. So Gaurav and I actually got quite a significant list. Gaurav, Philip, we need to fix OpenMix. We need BGP. Okay, workshop. Operators group. Philip used the OpenMix mailing list to start a NOG running. So I duly subscribed and I sent a few posts. And that was it. Nothing happened. In fact, I was made the admin of the mailing list and had to make any difference either. So exchange points, operator groups, and certainly not new things. We really tried to push this off in 2005. But some of us are patient. What else was happening then? Railcom was selling fiber infrastructure. Look at the price of a 2 megabit connection, $2,000 a month for 2 megabits per second. Or if you got yourself to the Russian border, you could get 2 megabits for $1,000 a month. What we also saw, so Mobicom and of course MiCom, which is Telecom Mongolia, both had fiber around the city, as well as fiber to China Unicom, which people basically said very unreliable, no good, and of course satellite links. 2.4 gigahertz wireless was pretty much unusable. Traffic levels around 20 megabits per second in. Think about what it is today. 2005 was also my first visit. So there's the view on the left from Bengal Hotel. That's the picture 16 years ago. What else is interesting? The top right, look at the cars back then. That United Airlines sign on the building, it's still on that building, at least on my last trip. So some things don't change. And that street on the bottom right, I've got a picture much later on, just you see how things have changed. We're back in 2009, ICTPA did a workshop. This was hosted at the Computer Science Management School, and that was my first introduction to ERDEMNET, which was the brand new research and education network. We taught a BGP workshop. We use ISIS for the interior protocol rather than OSPF because some of the providers were using ISIS. And it was the first V6 workshop in Mongolia as well. I'll come back to V6, but it was the first time we actually taught V6 there. The only problem with this, it happened right after the APNIC conference in Beijing. I got H1N1, so the 5-day workshop became 4 days, and I spent the next 3 days being very ill. Thankfully recovered in time to fly home, but that was a bit of a shock and a bit disappointing. But moral of that story is never teach workshops by yourself. Having a co-instructor deals with things like this happening. So I learned that lesson the very hard way. But look at 2009, I like pictures. The top right, that was a big change. So 2005, there was traffic. It was not too bad. 2009, look at the traffic. Nothing worked. I mean, the roads were completely jammed solid. I have so many photos of, sitting there in cars, not going anywhere. In fact, I said, I'll walk to the computer science school. It's going to be faster than trying to go by car. What else had happened? Top left, Blue Sky building had appeared from nowhere. And then the bottom left, there was another office building with a Louis Vuitton and other luxury brands in the ground floor, the Central Tower. That wasn't there in 2005. And my view from the Bengal Hotel had changed. Look at all the buildings on the left. The gear is still there, but other buildings had started appearing. And if you look on the right-hand one on the right, you see high-rise buildings in the distance, which were not there in 2005. Rapid development. So big changes. The other one was that GEMNET had arrived as the second transit provider, and they started very big. Cisco GSR's 10 gig link to Los Angeles, and that gave a good opportunity to put the teachings of that ISP workshop into practice. Dual stack network, we build it how we want to carry on, and a second link to Germany using inter-route to go through Russia. Lots of stories about that, but you know, the GEMNET folks can tell you all about those. It was, you know, summarizing it in a simple slide like this doesn't indicate the challenges that GEMNET had. Rapid growth. So Google was encouraging a Google Cache be deployed due to the traffic volumes. Infrastructure upgrades by GEMNET, inter-route was replaced with Global Crossing. They turned up at DKIX, got transit to Cogent Europe, and then a direct link to Hong Kong, which took a couple of years to put into place as well. More stories about that one. The next workshop was 2012, hosted by GEMNET, new venue, the Ramada Hotel. I think the Ramada Hotel had opened just a few years earlier, out on the western side of Ulaanbaatar. So notable events around that time was a lot of discussions with Mobicom about V6 deployment. The mix, well, the open mix had gone, and now the exchange point was moved into the National Data Center. And that was now supposedly an exchange point out there, but hosted in a government facility. iRoute had appeared. In fact, iRoute was one of the first route name servers to turn up in Ulaanbaatar, and this was hosted by Netnod. So Curtis Linkvist, who was CEO of Netnod then and also chair of EuroIX, the European Internet Exchange Point Association, joined me in the middle of that trip to set up iRoute. They don't really want to set it up in transit providers. They want to set up at exchanges, but of course there's no exchange point because NDC refused to give Curtis, chair of EuroIX, the industry association, access to the so-called exchange point at NDC. That was quite an unpleasant activity, I'll say it in public now, and did no favors or make no friends for at least Mongolia's interconnects. We also met with both GEMNET and Mobicom to try and encourage interconnection between the two transit providers, because the situation at that point was customers exclusively of GEMNET had to go all the way through the US just to get access to customers of Mobicom. So that was actually a backward step from the open mix that we saw earlier on. Pictures, I like photos, I take lots of photos. So Blue Sky building finally complete. And you know, the view from the Ramada top right, you can see the traffic, and we went to that beautiful Buddhist monastery not far from the Ramada Hotel as well. So that was wonderful to see that. We did touristy things. Somebody built a huge statue outside Ulaanbaatar of Genghis Khan, sitting on the This is the world's biggest equestrian statue anyway. You have no idea the size of this thing until you actually get up close. And you can actually go up to the top of the horse's head and take the photo. So my travels with Curtis around the outskirts of Ulaanbaatar, which is fun. I'm not quite sure about the eagles. They didn't like sitting on the perches. They preferred to sit on my shoulder. But anyway, that's what happens. Training continues. The story is a lot about training. And this is, again, all about best practices rather than the latest, greatest, fanciest tech. The CRC, the regulator, invited us to come in 2014. And this was a joint effort between CRC, Network Startup Resource Center, and Netnod. Advanced BGP, dual stack, emphasis on peering and exchange point. CRC trying to get an exchange point reestablished in Ulaanbaatar. We had lots of meetings, roundtable activities, and so forth. Pretty challenging kind of stuff. There was, honestly, I don't think there was the level of cooperation that we would have expected, but we're patient, we keep going with all this, trying to get interconnects happening. Our first workshop at IT Park. And that was a new experience for us. It was kind of interesting. I think taking workshop photos at the start is probably not the best idea, because on the right at the bottom there, we're all standing there looking quite miserable, apart from Curtis, who's always smiling. We probably should take these workshop photos at the end when we're all happier. But anyway, this is some sample of the workshop that we did. Again, wandering around in Mongolia and outside, we noticed a big change. I'm not going to ask anybody to guess, but I think the hint is in the bottom right. Ulaanbaatar seemed to have the world's largest supply of second-hand Toyota Prius, and these all from Japan, so they're all driving on the wrong side. So the steering wheel is on the right-hand side, whereas everybody in Mongolia drives on the right. So it was kind of interesting. So many Prius driving around there, which is actually quite a fascinating thing. But otherwise, just the general development and the tourism that we saw. I mean, the beautiful floral collection in Sukbatar Square as well. Okay, IPv6. Yes, well, I think this has been the longest running story anywhere. Mobicom's core network at V6 for many years, Gemnet's core network at V6 for many years, but nothing else. So there was then a collaboration between CRC, ITU, and APNIC to hold a 3-day V6 workshop at IT Park, both for decision makers and for technical staff. So it's part a policy workshop, part a technical workshop. 40 participants, and then with lots of meetings with different industry leaders to try and help set up a roadmap. This is 2015. If you've checked the agenda for today's workshop, guess what we're talking about later on in the day. More pictures. So there's a beautiful panorama view from the Ramada Hotel, looking east across the city. This was in the late afternoon, just beautiful colors and so on. We went back to the Chinggis Khan statue, and there was a Mongolian folk, I think it was one of the nomad tribes, correct me if I'm wrong, doing one of their gatherings. And that was so beautiful to see all the traditional outfits and the songs and acting and so forth. It was just a fascinating experience. And then the most recent chapter, the formation of mnNOG. Remember, Gaurav and I had started pushing this off in 2005. And every visit, it was, hey, how are we going with the network operators group? And, oh yeah, that's a nice idea, everybody says. And nothing happened. It was kind of like the exchange point discussions. It was kind of like the IPv6 discussions. Always very happy to talk about it. And then as soon as, the foreign invader, Philip, disappears, okay, back to business as usual until, oh no, he's come back again. Okay, we'll have to think about exchange point and IPv6. So talking about IPv6, ITU was invited again by CRC to come and run another V6 workshop. So partnering with APNIC, I came as the technical expert as part of that, along with the APNIC team. So it was another push, same format as the 2015 workshop, different set of participants. The 2015 folks had moved on. There was a new group and new excitement about getting V6 deployed. And actually, the network operators group really formed as a side activity. It wasn't part of our trip, but it kind of was just a side activity. Group of folks got together. I think they would say there's a lot of social engineering happening. So how are NOGs created, people always ask. Well, in mnNOG's case, friends get together, or say new friends get together, because actually one of the things, if you look at the photo in the bottom right, see how everybody's kind of just sitting there, long faces, not really talking. Okay, somebody is talking, but there was somebody standing on the left hand, I won't mention who it is, saying, come on, we need to look at how to get collaboration in the operations community and so forth. It was kind of really interesting dynamic because by the end of the evening, we had the photo on the right, agreement going to do something. I suppose being the Grand Khan actually helps. And not that I'm recommending, a hotel or public bar as a place to set up NOGs, but honestly, most internet operational and standards that seem to be developed in social activities, in restaurants and so forth, rather than in the formal people sit around tables and hold formal meetings. So this is a very, very traditional getting things done. So this was the formation of mnNOG, and Clay and Tashi at APNIC and I were there to, well, help out. What is it called? Grease the wheels, I think we say in our culture, just to help out with getting the NOG happening. So that is definitely a success story. We had arrived in Ulaanbaatar in October 2018. Clay and I had just come from Fiji, direct. Fiji in October is hot, humid, sticky. We'd arrived in, I don't know, I think it was below freezing, trying our best not to look cold, but looking very, very cold. Beautiful light show in the Parliament buildings. We saw the new airport south of the city. There was snow to greet us. This is the view from the, forgotten the name of the hotel now, the hotel we were staying in. And of course, Tashi and Baya and me trying to look, I don't know, fresh and happy and excited, even though it was, I don't know how many degrees below it was up there in the memorial on the hill. Anyways, so this is just part of the story, the bit that I've seen, the bit that I've helped with. I'm glad to have been part of it. I'm more glad that the local industry and the local internet folks have done so much to push the internet onwards in Mongolia. We've got the mnNOG3 conference today. Number 3 means we've had 2 previous successful conferences. B6 deployment, well, we look forward to the panel discussion this afternoon. But maybe we'll see more local content, new types of content delivery. These are all the opportunities that are awaiting and available for us. Ongoing training, we see a lot of new technologies appearing on the internet today, a lot of interest in getting training on these new technologies. And my ongoing plea, please don't forget operational best practices. With all these new tech, you cannot deploy them unless you know how the substrate underneath works and is working to its best ability. New transit carriers, people always think there's new opportunities in markets, but being a landlocked country is a big challenge for Mongolia as it is for all the other landlocked countries. You're so dependent on what your neighbors do or think, whether they like you or they don't like you. So from a technology side, well, more, bigger, faster, better. But that doesn't itself make an internet. Collaboration has to happen. It has to happen at the personal level. It has to happen at the business level. And I think one of the biggest changes I've seen in the internet industry in Mongolia is how people are working together now. I mean, my first trip in 2005, it was that workshop. Nobody really had met each other before. They knew each other's email addresses, and everybody else, even when we held the mnNOG, let's say socialization in the Grand Khan, several people had told Tashi and Clay and me, we only know these people as email addresses. This is the first time we've met them because our business doesn't have anything to do with their business. And you look at the change today that this, the mnNOG team has been able to pull off 4 days of training, collaborating to make some really complicated workshops actually happen and complete successfully, as well as the event that we have today. That's the testament to the collaboration that I see. So all I can say really to finish off, congratulations to mnNOG, congratulations to the industry. I'd love to carry on being part of your story. And I'd like to wish you all great success in the future. Thank you all very much. Oh, and if anybody wants to ask questions, I'm happy to answer questions if you wish.
Okay, good morning. I have one question about from Australia. Yeah, it is incorrect. Okay, thank you. And in your country, how to use in conference and meeting in Zoom or Microsoft Teams or Google Meeting, and which one? Because in my country, more used in 3 of things. In this case, in the last 2 years, maybe increasing outside traffic, maybe 100 and more percentages in your country.
Oh my goodness. Oops. Yes, it's. I think it's almost every organization has their favorite video conferencing tool. I think, if I look at my laptop, I've got probably 7 or 8 different tools, depending on which entity I'm having to participate with. But certainly for using for conferences like this, Zoom is probably the most commonly used. And we're lucky here in Australia because there's actually a Zoom data center in Sydney. And so generally it will use that data center, and it depends on which account or type of account you have, you can choose your data center. I know some parts of the world now have a Zoom kind of cache or proxy that you can install locally in the network, and that system, so Zoom conferences can use that local system rather than having to use one of the data center systems somewhere else in the world. And I don't know what they have in Mongolia, but that would definitely be something for the transit providers to look at doing, making something like that available. But I've had customers, clients of mine use Teams. There's you run through the list. There's WebEx. There's GoToMeeting. There's a long list. Some people even trying to do things on just there's the research and education one. I temporarily forget. There are all these different systems, and it really comes down to people's favorites. But in my own experience, it tends to be Zoom is the most popular.
Thank you.
So a question in the chat: how do I see the future of mnNOG? Well, being part of getting the first mnNOG happening, I think there was a lot in the team at that point. There was a lot of belief that, oh, this is too hard and it's so much hard work, and how can we get people to work together and collaborate? And I think, this was again mentioned at the end of the workshops yesterday. It's not just 1 or 2 of the same people who do everything. We always need to get new people encouraged to join in. So hopefully the future mnNOG sees more people coming along and helping to volunteer to produce this. And so it's not the same people who keep doing the thing. So hopefully that helps. mnNOG must carry on. Anyway, my time is over. So thank you all very much. And I'll hand back to the moderator.